We're ready.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 4th regular meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. I call to order the meeting at 7 p.m. Madam Secretary, may we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Kuznick. Here. Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards. Absent. And Chair Alpert.
I'm here. Item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4, public comments or written communications. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already included in tonight's agenda. If you would like to speak, please fill out a green speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to the recording secretary. If you're participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. Do we have any speaker cards tonight? Sure. Mhm.
Hello, commissioners. Good evening. My name is Taiwan, Tywon, Sacontrie, Sacontrie. I wish to address you that lately, specifically post-pandemic, I find myself and my family having a difficult time feeling safe, doing business around town, as well as going to restaurants and just shopping around, because you have allowed so many businesses that are funded by communist Chinese capital. At times, I feel my life is endangered. There were times that I come out of restaurants that are run by communist Chinese, and I know because every time they are now able to recognize me by my image or my voice or something, because every time I go into a restaurant, somebody else would always go in there, and I would know that I'm being tagged or being surveilled. And there were times that I find my food were tampered with. So I really would like to urge you that in your planning to please allow a diversity of capital so that I don't have to feel like I am a communist Chinese citizen, even though I'm an American citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. And according to the Brown Act, we are not allowed to respond to public comment, but the staff does listen and take notes. Do we have any other speaker cards?
We received no late communication for this item. We have no other speaker cards and no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public comment. Item 5, additions and revisions. We have none. Item 6, consent calendar. There are none. And item 7, approval of minutes from our last meeting, September 20th, 2022. Any corrections, changes, additions? If not, if somebody could press the green button to make a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the minutes of September 20th, 2022.
And Commissioner Marks has seconded it. Okay, motion passes 4-0-0-1. Item 8, continued items after the close of the public hearing, there are none. Item 9, continue items, public hearing, there are none. And item 10, our main event for tonight, public hearing, new items, item 10.1, Marketplace Mixed Use Development Project. We have a staff report by Ryan Driscoll. Hi, Ryan.
All right. Good evening, Chair Albert and Planning Commissioners. So this item is for the Marketplace Mixed Use Development Project located at 130 Marketplace. The subject property is a 12.43 acre parcel. It's roughly the southern portion of the existing marketplace center. It has a general plan designation of mixed use, a zoning designation of mixed use or MU. The project site area is not the entire subject property. It's 3.91 acres. It's a portion of it, as roughly identified on this aerial photo here. A little bit of background on the Marketplace Center. It was approved through Contra Costa County in 1986, including the library, then annexed into the city in 1987. In 1995, the city changed the general plan designation to mixed use. In 2006, the zoning was changed to mixed use. In 1998 and 2000, there was a couple of additions approved for the former Nob Hill Foods tenant space and the CVS Pharmacy tenant space. And in 2019, an addition in modifications were approved for the existing Trader Joe's tenant space. A little bit of background on the proposed project. So the applicant submitted and the Planning Commission reviewed and provided comments on a concept review proposal in January 2021 for a 284 unit apartment development project. And then after that, the applicant came back to the city, submitted a preliminary housing development application. And in November 23rd, 2021, the city accepted the application for the preliminary housing development application for a mixed use project. So had been changed since the concept review proposal. It had been changed to a 40 single family home project with exterior renovation of the existing eating, drinking establishment or commercial building, 1870 square feet in size. And so after that, the applicant then submitted a formal development plan application. That's the proposed project under review tonight, and additional applications on April 28th, 2022, within the prior to the expiration of the 180-day period since the preliminary housing development application was accepted. So the proposed applications were then deemed complete by the city on September 15, 2022. So this, before I get into the proposed project, I wanted to go over a state law related to the Housing Accountability Act. There's several areas that are pertinent and applicable to the project for review. First, I mentioned the applicant submitted a preliminary housing development application that's been accepted in part of this. So that application freezes the applicable standards and requirements and fees as of November 23rd, 2021. Also, the HAA or Housing Accountability Act establishes that the city will review the project through objective standards. And so the project has to comply with criteria for objective, quantifiable, written development standards, conditions, and policies. Some of the criteria related to objective standards are that there's no personal or subjective judgment, that be uniformly verifiable, and facilitate density permitted on site and as proposed with the project. The HAA also establishes a 30-day timeline from the date the applications were deemed complete. So for this project, that was September 15, 2022. So 30 days from there, the city has a 30-day timeline to provide the applicant written notice of any inconsistency. And so this meeting here with the Planning Commission tonight provides an opportunity for the commission to provide feedback within that 30-day timeline. Also, the Housing Accountability Act requires that the project be reviewed with a 5 public hearing limit. The decision by the Planning Commission will be required by the 4th public hearing, and we'll be reserving 1 public hearing with the City Council for any appeal if one is filed. And I should mention this meeting counts as the first public meeting of those 5. So the proposed project, the residential component would demolish about 55,600 square feet of existing tenant space. It would construct 40 single family for sale detached condo units, 4 junior accessory dwelling units, subdivide the project site for condominium purposes. It provides 6 new guest parking spaces. And it provides an integrated site circulation with roadways and paseo and walkways. Also provides a new marketplace roadway pedestrian connection with Drive D. This is a rendering of the proposed architecture. There's 3 floor plans, 2 architectural styles. You can see them here. This is at a rendering at the corner with Drive A and Marketplace. The project also includes a commercial component. So on the commercial parcel, there's the existing 1869 square foot building, which would remain and would be renovated on the exterior as shown in the plans and partly on this slide. There's also some additional landscape improvements and outdoor expansion of the outdoor patio space on the parcel. In terms of land use requirements, the project is consistent with the general plan zoning ordinance, mixed use descriptions and related definitions. There's more detail in the staff report with that. Also, the project provides an integrated mix of horizontal, non-residential and residential uses on the 3.91 acre project site area. The proposed density for the residential portion is 14.7 dwelling units per acre. That's within the 14 to 30 range allowed by the mixed use zone. The proposed floor area ratio is 0.53, which is within the maximum 0.7 allowed by the mixed use zone. In terms of development standards, the proposed project is consistent with the objective development standards, such as setbacks, height limits, landscaping, parking. It's more detailed in some tables in the staff report. Also, it's consistent with the additional mixed-use zone standards, as mentioned in the zoning ordinance, with the requirement that it has to comply with the Housing Accountability Act objective standards requirement. The remainder marketplace center, so that's the portion that's not part of the project site area. We've also gone through and identified development standards that it will be consistent with as the result of this project for the proposed project. So for example, the floor area ratio for the remainder center will be 0.26. That's within the maximum 0.7 allowed. For landscape, it will be at 15.8%, which is exceeding the 15% minimum required. For non-retail uses and the limitation that's as part of the zoning ordinance, it will be at 18.7%. That's below the 25% max that's allowed by the zoning ordinance. In terms of parking, there'll be 680 commercial parking spaces provided. That's exceeding the 586 that's required for commercial spaces. And that is more fully described in the appendix attachment to the staff report from staff on for parking analysis and non-retail analysis. And for the landscape and floor area ratios and parking space calculations, we use the applicant's provided site plan shown on the slide here. In terms of other general plan policies, concerning all the policies together and with the HAA objective standards requirement, the proposed project is consistent with the general plan guiding and implementing policies, including the identified economic policies, the general plan policy 46I26, that's the Marketplace Orchard Supply Center master plan policy, which requires an analysis of features to facilitate improvements related to circulation, access, visibility, and encouraging a broader mix of uses. There's further detail in the staff report and in the applicant's project plans. Also, it's consistent with General Plan Policy 11.4I2, which combines residential and retail uses in a mixed-use designated area identified as a housing opportunity site. So staff's analysis is that the proposed project is consistent with the applicable objective standards in the general plan, zoning ordinance, municipal code, given the review limitations of the HAA, Housing Accountability Act. And the recommendation is to receive the staff report and presentation by the applicant, open the public hearing, take public testimony, close the public hearing, discuss and deliberate, provide feedback on the 30-day timeline related to any inconsistency, and continue the public hearing to a date to be determined. And so I'm available if you have any questions for me or staff before we go to.
Questions for Ryan? And I assume the applicant's here tonight to also
Yes.
want to do a
Yeah,
presentation.
they're here.
So do you want to ask questions of Ryan now?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Marks.
Ryan, I have two questions. And they're relatively simple. The first is that the staff report does not include any will serve letters from police, fire, or any of the outside agencies that provide services to the city. Where are they? And when will we get them?
Well, we provided the project plans through our normal development review committee process where we send out to outside agencies and internal departments. We receive comments from the utilities agency, outside agencies, including utilities and school district. We did not receive any comments that they cannot provide service to the project site with the proposed.
Normally, we receive copies of those letters. And I would like at the next staff meeting to receive all of the comments that we got. I'm particularly concerned. In every jurisdiction that I've worked in, the fire department was very, very concerned about any street that had one way in and out. And we have one in this particular proposed plan. And that may be okay with fire department here, and I will go along with that, given that they're the experts, but it's curious to me. And I'd like to see what their comments are about that particular street.
Yeah, we can provide that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The second question is really, I suspect I know the answer, but I want to hear it from the source. Guest parking is not required. I'm assuming this is a part of one of the state laws that says that we don't have any longer the ability to require parking.
Well, it's actually single family development. So guest parking is not required with single family detached units.
Okay,
It is required for multifamily development, which maybe that's what you're referring to. We do have a standard for that.
Okay.
In addition, there are exceptions for parking related to ADUs as well. It's not required within proximity to a bus stop.
okay. I was aware of that part, but the other one, you're right. I should have thought of that. Thank you.
Other questions for Ryan at this time? Commissioner Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first thing I'm going to do, Ryan, is to ask you to speak up, whether that's speaking closer to the mic or projecting. The two problems are you have a very soft voice, and at my age, my ears don't work as well as they used to when I was your age. So to prevent me from asking the same question multiple times, let's do it. If you could, I would really appreciate that. This project is geared for 3.91 acres in the marketplace development, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's the project site area.
And the applicant proposes to build 40 single-family homes, correct?
Yes,
And these are for sale units, correct?
yes,
Now, the marketplace is in an area that is classified by both our general plan and our zoning ordinance as mixed use, right?
yep, yes.
And both the general plan and the mixed use, the zoning ordinance have density requirements for residential development in a mixed use area. Is that right?
It does.
And the current general plan / zoning ordinance requirement for residential development in a mixed use area is between 14 and 30 dwelling units per acre. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, the 14 to 30 units per acre. Now, this project covers 3.91 acres, but in our general plan and zoning ordinance, we use sort of a different figure. Don't we use in our general plan the idea that density is determined by dwelling units per net acre?
That's correct.
And in the general plan, it talks about units per net developable acre, correct?
Yes,
Now, that concept would apply to the residential section of a mixed-use development, would it not?
yes, yeah,
And in the general plan, it describes residential density in these terms. Residential density is expressed as housing units per net acre exclusive of public street, other rights of way, drainage easements, other non-exclusive easements, and other unbuildable lands, close quote. Basically, the concept behind that is we don't force a developer to build to a certain number of units if he can't or she can't build on certain portions of the property, correct?
correct.
Okay, so basically we look at what the developer can build on and work from there, right?
That's correct.
Okay, now I got on my hands and knees this morning to look at the large sheets that the applicant presented to us. And on sheet TM, Tom Mary 1, it states that the net site area, which I assume is the applicant's description of net developable acreage, is 2.7 acres. And it appears that the 2.7 acres was derived from 2.2 acres for the residential site area, i.e. the condominiums, and 0.5 acres for the commercial site, i.e. Starbucks. That's how they came up with the 2.7 acres, which is 1.2 acres less than the gross area site of 3.9 acres. Now, according to footnote 9 on sheet TM1, the 2.2 acres of net residential acreage was calculated by deducting private roads and easements from the 3.9 acres. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Now, a private roadway is something that a developer actually builds, does he, she, or it not?
that's correct.
And in this case, what the developer would be doing would be stripping down the area that it wants to build the condos on, including demolition of certain parts of the marketplace area, and then paving over some of that space for roadways, correct?
Correct.
And so that means that developer is actually building on the property, but instead of building condos or the redo of Hop Yard Brewery, it's building roads, right? Now, under our general plan definition of net acreage, private roadways don't get excluded from the gross site acreage, do they not?
We have to exclude easements that are
Right, we'll get to
unrestricted.
easements. I'm only taking
Okay.
this one step at a time. But you would agree with me that in calculating net acreage on this particular project, you would not subtract the area that is devoted to the private roadways, would you?
It is dedicated to the circulation. And private roadways are typically easements.
Go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair. We had a significant discussion about this in years past with Windmill or with the Golden Skate property, as well as some of the discussions on 2481 in terms of what is net and what is gross. The determination is that these roadways, private, are considered non-exclusive easements for the purposes of calculation.
Okay.
And so we're not able, I mean, they're basically netted out.
Well, then you're excluding them from the gross site.
Correct.
All right. Now, now it's, you say it's considered a non-exclusive easement, and was that written into the general plan or the zoning ordinance?
There's some different language between both the zoning ordinance and the general plan, but the non-exclusive easement language is. And so with the discussions with the city attorney at the time, when we looked at the Golden Skate property, it was determined that those count as non-exclusive easements because of the utilities and general public access.
So you're anticipating there'll be general public access to all the roadways in this development, including the ones that go in between the buildings?
To my knowledge, it's not a gated community.
Okay. Now, the mixed use definition in the general plan is properties on which different uses such as office, commercial, and residential are combined in a single building or on a single site in an integrated development project, correct?
Correct.
And this, the zoning ordinance has a similar provision, does it not?
Talking about the mixed use,
I'm sorry,
which zoning ordinance doesn't definition?
for a definition of mixed use.
Yeah.
All right. And the general plan defines development as the physical extension or construction of urban land uses, such as the construction or alteration of structures, does it not?
I believe so, yes.
And the zoning ordinance basically has the same type of definition.
Yeah.
Now, in the marketplace development we're looking at tonight, the applicant is proposing to demolish a commercial structure and put up condominiums, which is purely a residential structure, but it's not proposing to touch at all the existing commercial property. Is that right?
Well, they are renovating the portion of the existing 1,800 square foot building,
I'm sorry.
and it is part of the project site.
I'm sorry. You're gonna have to speak up.
Sorry, the 1,869 square foot building, that's the existing eating and drinking establishment, it is part of the project site.
Is part of the project site.
Yes,
Well, my question was, the applicant is not intending to change that structure at all in terms of adding to it or increasing it. Is that right?
that's correct.
Okay, now. The definition of a mixed use project in the zoning ordinance is a project that combines both non-residential and residential uses on the same site, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now, what the applicant done is describe this as a proposed development, mixed use development project. The zoning ordinance defines a proposed project as a proposed new structure, new addition to an existing structure, or area of new site development. These do not include the alteration of any portion of an existing structure other than an addition. Now, in terms of the zoning ordinance, the fact that the commercial structure, i.e. Starbucks, is being untouched would not make that part of a mixed use project because nothing is being done to that particular structure, correct?
So in this case, we have the Housing Accountability Act, and it states if there's any inconsistency between the zoning ordinance and the general plan. And in this case, there is. The mixed use land use designation, the definition doesn't describe a proposed project in that way for mixed use. It doesn't exclude that element for proposed projects.
Well,
So-
the general plan also doesn't describe setbacks, does it?
It does not.
And isn't the function of the zoning ordinance to implement the general provisions of the general plan?
That's true, but with the Housing Accountability Act, if there's any inconsistency between the definitions with the zoning ordinance and the general plan, it reverts back to the general plan.
Well, there's nothing in the general plan that says that not changing a commercial structure as part of a mixed use development is a mixed use project, correct?
Right.
Through
All
the-
right.
Through the chair. I think what we're getting lost in some semantics here. I think it's important to recognize that the intent of creating mixed-use shopping centers is to create a mix of uses. And in the case of drawing a boundary, you can retrofit an existing property to include residential to create a combination. The fact that Starbucks is being remodeled as part of this is irrelevant to the creation of a mixed-use project area. It really has nothing to do with it. It's how they draw the boundaries of the project and how they are linked together going forward.
Well, under that description, then it would be permissible for the owner of the shopping center to tear down the entire shopping center and leave a small barista development as the commercial section of a mixed use development, would it not?
Technically, yes, because again, we don't have a specific amount of commercial that's defined. And so that's something that this group is discussing as part of the general plan update in terms of minimum commercial requirements. But as it stands now, there is no specific ratio that is required.
Well, because the Housing Accountability Act requires an objective standard, and we have no standard at all for what portion of a mixed-use development has to be used for non-residential uses. Isn't it true that the owner of this shopping center could tear down the entire shopping center and build nothing but housing?
They could make an application to do that, but we'd have to consider it at the time it was filed. There would still need to be a commercial component unless they could assert some other rights under the Housing Accountability Act and the like. But more to the point, it's not productive to speculate on what may or may not happen. We have an active development application in front of us that we should limit our discussion to.
Oh, I understand that. But the issue is whether at this point, because we have a deadline to serve notice on the applicant that the project is or is not consistent with our general plan and zoning ordinance. One of the issues is whether it's consistent with our mixed use definition. That was the reason for my question to Ryan. And what I've heard is that because the general plan doesn't specifically say what this zoning ordinance does, which is true most of the time, that therefore there's a quote inconsistency, close quote, between the two, notwithstanding that our city council has certified that the zoning ordinance is consistent with the general plan. Is it not?
It has.
I had a couple of other questions, and maybe I'm going to take up what some other people have said, but since I've got it on my list, let's go through it now. One of the issues that came up was whether the requirement in our general plan for a master plan for the shopping center to be drafted was complied with. What I didn't see in the staff report was whether the applicant had attempted to contact the owner or owners of the remainder of the marketplace development to determine whether a master plan could be developed. Are you aware of any outreach to the other owners that took place by this particular applicant?
No, I'm not aware of any direct outreach.
That might be a question better directed to the applicant.
Right, but since he's in front of me, I thought I'd ask him.
Okay.
One of the issues that came up also in your description, when I say yours, I'm talking about staff in general, not you necessarily personally, was that the proposed project would create more visibility for the shopping center by removing basically the Nob Hill portion of the property. I wonder if you could explain to me how removing that portion of the property and then putting condominiums along the backside that sort of faces the reflections area would enable people either driving on El Costa Boulevard or Bollinger to see the marketplace any better than they do now.
Well, from Alcosta and Bollinger, it doesn't necessarily change it from that vantage point, but it certainly does from Marketplace.
Well, wouldn't it be true for the most part that the people driving on Marketplace know where they're going? They're going to the Marketplace Center. They're not just driving around.
That could be.
Now, the way that the condominiums are structured, basically almost like in a U shape, isn't what's happened is you're trading the backside of the Nob Hill building for basically the backside of a townhome complex?
Well, the townhomes that are along Marketplace do front Marketplace with their.
I'm sorry?
The townhomes along Marketplace, the front door is front Marketplace.
So how?
It's not the back of it.
Right. So how does a person driving along Marketplace have a better view of the shopping center by looking at the townhomes than it would at the backside of Nob Hill?
I think you have to look at it from the larger center as a whole. I mean, they are constructing new buildings, yes, but overall the visibility is improved into the center.
Okay. The staff report on page 29 refers to a 4,000 square foot retail structure being demolished. And I'm not sure where that was. Is that the portion of the building that would be, you would come to if you turned into the marketplace before you got to Nob Hill, where the pharmacy was and I think a cleaners?
I believe so. Yeah, you
Okay.
mentioned 4,000 square feet. Yeah. So there's some additional commercial tenant space just south of where Nob Hill Foods used to be. It's also included to be removed.
Yeah, now the area that would be to the north of where Nob Hill was, that's Learning Express, that's going to remain intact under this proposal?
Yes, correct.
Now, last question is, under the application, the applicant is not providing any below market rate units consistent with our inclusionary housing ordinance, is it?
Correct. They're not providing any below market rate units. I didn't go over that in the presentation. But the ordinance does allow for the applicant to provide a fee.
Yeah,
fee
basically,
out for single family development.
yeah, basically they're feeing out of the inclusionary housing requirement.
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Kuznick, do you have any questions for Ryan?
I have one. If you could go back to the calculations on the dwelling units per acre, and how you got to the 14.7, because I was following along with Commissioner Wallace. But if you could just, to the best of your teaching ability, walk me through that math problem.
Yeah. So Commissioner Wallace was going through that process. So it's based on the net acreage.
Which, according to the page we were on, the net acreage is how much?
It is,
I think it was TM. What did you have it, Eric? TM1, I think. There we go. TM1, thank you.
TM1.
Yeah, okay, in teeny tiny print. Okay,
It was two. Mine's really tiny here.
I know, you have young eyes. Younger eyes. I'm thinking it's 2.72.
Yes, 2.72. And so that includes the commercial parcel also.
So if we were, so you are including the commercial portion of this in order to calculate the dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, because it's the entire project site area.
Okay, but we're not using the 3.91 figure.
No, because it's not the net acreage. And we use the 40 dwelling units.
So just to be clear, so when we do the calculations, this includes the square footage of the eating, drinking establishment and the eating, drinking establishment's parking lot, which are non-residential, in calculating the dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, for the project site area, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems to me a little fast and loose with terminology, but that's not your department. Go ahead. I'm done.
I have no questions at the time, but the applicant, did they want to make a presentation? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all in person. I've watched you often on television, and so it's good we're all here in person. I appreciate that. Good to see all your faces. I wish Vice Chair Edwards is present. Hope she's well. So good evening. My name is Byron DeOracle. I am the Director of Entitlement Planning for TRC Retail. We are the owners of the Marketplace Shopping Center. Chair Alpert, and commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the horizontal mixed-use residential community and commercial renovation project that we have before you tonight. I want to first introduce our team. I think on Zoom is our Senior Vice President for TRC, Scott Grady. He was going to be here, but he is under the weather. So he stayed behind and is on Zoom, and I trust that we have him. Also with us is Jonathan Boriak, who I know you've all seen before with KTGY, is our project architect. And then seated next to him is Mr. Alan Murphy, who is our land use counsel with Perkins Coie. I do want to acknowledge the work of Ryan and Mr. Barr and Ms. Chamberlain and Ms. Yee. They've been very responsive to all the questions we've had, particularly in the context of everything all jurisdictions are doing, including yours and mine. I'm a planning commissioner in Costa Mesa with respect to housing elements and general plan updates and zone changes. And we know you're all busy but your planning staff is top shelf. They've been very responsive to our questions and we appreciate that. So we're pleased to have this opportunity to present our plan for the residences at Marketplace. It's a horizontal mixed-use community featuring new for-sale homes, the renovation and integration of a popular eating and drinking establishment as part of the community, and new pedestrian elements to connect the residents and the shopping center to the surrounding community. Our goal is pretty simple, actually. It's to right-size and revitalize the outdated shopping center for long-term success. Deliver quality new homes into the mixed-use zone Marketplace in line with its land use designation, its zoning, and its housing opportunity site designation in the city's housing element, and improve pedestrian connections and access to the surrounding community. So the Marketplace is 36 years old, give or take a few months, and it's on 12.43 acres, as Ryan mentioned to you. It's mixed, and I'm covering mixed ground, Ryan covered, so I'll move through it fast. General plan land use designation for mixed use came about in 1995, zoned mixed use in 2006. As part of its overall housing strategy, the city has listed the shopping center as a housing opportunity site in its 4th and 5th cycle housing elements, and it continues as a housing opportunity site in the draft 6th cycle element. Anchor tenants are Trader Joe's and CVS Pharmacy. The largest structure, the 55,600 square foot former Nob Hill site, is vacant. Not unlike many retail centers of its size and tenant mix, the Marketplace has been underperforming in line with changing consumer habits and trends in e-commerce, lingering perhaps permanently in what I call kind of consumer long COVID, and changes in local office market populations. I should probably be moving my slides along. There we go. So some project history relative to the property, and save for Commissioner or Vice Chair Edwards, who was not on the commission at the time, he'll move through, I think it was Commissioner Franks. TRC has been working on a redevelopment concept for the Marketplace for some time, several years now. Our objective throughout has been the development of a plan that, one, implements the property's mixed-use designation and zoning through the introduction of a residential community. Two, right sizes the overall gross leasable area of the center to current and long-term market trends. Proposes connections between the residences at Marketplace and other key properties to promote adjacent mixed uses. In November 2020, we submitted a concept review application for a mixed-use apartment community. And on January 5th, 2021, we presented the concept to the Planning Commission in a concept review public hearing, which was held virtually at the time because of the pandemic. Now, as you'll recall, TRC's original concept called for a 284 unit apartment community on the 3.19 acres we've referenced tonight. The project proposal included 35 below market rate units, 15% of the total project units per the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. Architecture featured a 5-story structure wrapping a parking garage housing 454 parking spaces. We submitted the concept review application. We had the hearing, and the feedback we received from the commission and the community centered around neighborhood compatibility, scale, and massing principally. So I recall my comments very clearly following that hearing, that we listened intently. We took the comments very seriously, and we promised that we would go back and see if there was something we could do based on commissioner comments, based on community comments. Our design team and our finance team looked at ways to reduce the scale of the project. We looked at 4-story options, 3-story options, reduced units, still requiring obviously an inclusionary housing component. And very quickly, the economics fell apart on the project. So we decided not to proceed with an apartment community. So we began developing a single-family detached home concept within the existing general plan zoning and development standard for mixed use on the same project site footprint. And the project before you this evening is the result of that effort. So as Ryan spelled out, the proposal for this single-family detached condominiums, rightly identified by Commissioner Wallace. It's a condominium map, but it is single-family detached product. It's on 3.91 acres, compliant with the horizontal mixed-use general plan land use designation and zoning, 40 single-family detached condominiums, 4 junior accessory dwelling units, and I will offer at this stage to, I believe it was Commissioner Wallace, that we are still discussing and open to deed restricting those junior accessory dwelling units for below market rate tenants. Or we also include the renovation of the 1,869 square foot eating and drinking establishment, which is now the Starbucks. And I will touch on that the renovations aren't insignificant. It isn't a tear down a new structure. It does expand the outdoor seating. So there are new elements to that structure that we think bring it into conformity with the zoning code that you were talking about. And then new pedestrian connectivity between the eating and drinking establishment and walkways on Marketplace, directly off of Marketplace, and through the residential community. And you can see this is a rendering of that paseo in the middle of the community. This is not a gated community. These are all publicly accessible spaces. So in that regard, these are open spaces that the San Ramon community can enjoy. Okay. So the discussion about the master plan, we looked at that language in the general plan and tried to divine exactly what it means, as it appears maybe even staff has thought about it. From our perspective, we did not reach out to Sports Basement. Our perspective is that a marketplace, and I'll say planning area, so apart from the shopping center and inclusive of Sports Basement, properties north of it, properties north of Montgomery, a master plan by an individual property owner for all those properties, or just the Sports Basement, is not something I've seen in my career as a planning commissioner. I would think that if the city would like to do something like that, that the city can initiate its own master planning process for that planning area. However, we wanted to attempt to, we thought about how can we at least respond to that policy. And it talks about analyzing connectivity, visibility, pedestrian access to community infrastructure such as Iron Horse Trail, or to the surrounding neighborhood and into the balance of the shopping center. So what we wanted to show you on this community context and connectivity graphic is, one, the pedestrian connection that we're proposing to create on the west side of the new Drive D between that housing community and the balance of the marketplace that extends directly across onto the sports basement property and then on out through that access point to Iron Horse Trail. Also, the raised crosswalk between the residential community and the Marketplace Shopping Center on the Drive D. And then over to the right, you'll see multiple access points off of Market through the community and direct access out to the eating and drinking establishment. And then also, and I'll show you in a subsequent slide, there are pedestrian access points on the southwest and southeast side of the market fronting part of the community that are direct pedestrian access points into the community and into the center. And here's a better kind of illustration of that. So you get up to the upper left, that oval crossing Market, that's the rectangular rapid flashing crosswalk that we're proposing to connect the community and the marketplace to the sports basement property and on out to Iron Horse Trail. The two ovals at roughly 7 o'clock and 4 o'clock on the diagram are the direct pedestrian access points off of Market into the community. The raised crosswalk is the upper circle, raised crosswalk into the shopping center to create connectivity between the residential community and the balance of the Marketplace Shopping Center. And then obviously all the community streets within the center that enter into off of Market and then also off of Drive D from the shopping center. The green spaces you see are the open space components, are the community paseo, which is the long rectangle. The green space to the right near the eating and drinking establishment, Starbucks, is publicly accessible open space, can be used. And then in terms of pedestrian access and connectivity and walkability, our proposal installs a new sidewalk and landscape parkway from the southern entrance to the community, moving clockwise up to Drive D, which is the green strip that you see on that diagram. So in terms of product mix, you'll see various architectural styles to your right. We're proposing 3 bedrooms and an office to 4 bedroom units, 3 to 3.5 bathrooms, ranging in size from 2,183 to 2,309 square feet, 3 stories, 4 junior accessory dwelling units. And actually, Jonathan pointed out to me that the way they're configured, they actually could qualify as accessory dwelling units. But I do want to reiterate that deed restricting these is something that we're still thinking about. It's not off the table at all. So the Starbucks renovation, you see the materials and the improvements that will be used to improve the storefront. And then the diagram for the new or the expanded outdoor eating and drinking area outside, new landscaping, new ground cover, furniture, new landscaping, as I mentioned, in terms of the trees. And then if you look off to the upper right-hand corner of the diagram, Marketplace, that's the pedestrian connection from Marketplace for the public into that area. And then there's a walkway in between the large tree and the first smaller tree where pedestrian access from the community and from marketplaces is possible. So on the general plan policy and issues, we've looked at this very closely, and our council has done a really good job for us developing what we think are solid findings for all the general plan consistencies and zoning consistencies. But I thought Ryan and the staff report and did an excellent job on articulating the findings of why these general plan policies are, the project is consistent with these general planning policies and with zoning policies. So I don't necessarily have to go through all of those. So that's our presentation for tonight. I appreciate your time and your attention. We're here to answer questions. Mr. Grady, I believe, is on Zoom, and I'll defer to him if there's some questions where I don't have information at my fingertips. Mr. Murphy is here on any of the finer legal points on the general plan policy issues. And Mr. John Boriak with KTGY is here on design elements. So again, thanks very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant at this time?
I have very specific questions on,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, here we go. So are the driveways large enough for the owners to park in their driveway?
I think, John, do you want to let John take care of that?
Good evening, Jonathan Boriak with KTGY. I'm the project architect. The driveway aprons are 3 feet deep, so they're not parkable driveways. Each house has a 2-car covered garage, and they're all alley accessed off the rear of the homes, and then the front doors on the opposite side.
Okay, thank you. All right, I have more questions. So, okay. Next to the units that you have listed as ADUs, there are 2 doors, one by the porch and one on the side. So if that ADU is someone else living there, who controls the porch? The homeowner or the ADU resident?
Well, so even if it's an ADU, this is a single owner of a unit. That's how ownership happens in a single family home like this with an ADU. So you have one owner of both of those. The idea of an ADU is that it can be rental, for another family member, something like that.
Okay. What was your decision on not providing any kind of playground or tot lot?
Based on hitting minimum densities for us, right? We're coming in at 14.7 DUs to the acre with a minimum density of 14. So there's not really space for tot lot like that. And then there's access to parks, specifically new parks coming in as part of Bishop Ranch 1 and their concept plans right across.
And where do you envision people walking their dogs and putting poop stations?
We did not address that in this.
Well, these are important things to residents. Okay. Moving on. Sorry, more questions. Let's see. So the other question that there is a 6-foot tall masonry wall, and part of the general plan goal is to increase the visibility. So what is the need for a 6-foot wall? If the part of this project is to increase visibility in this area, in this project.
And
I think that's a little excessive.
Commissioners, I understand you're talking about the wall specifically at the side yard of the residential units across adjacent.
No, I think it's on D Street.
Yeah, to drive D.
Okay.
So that is serving as both sound and privacy buffer because that is their, for essence, their rear yard, their private yard from Drive D, which is a traffic access point and pedestrian access point. That is the only solid wall along that. All the other frontages, both between existing Starbucks and the new homes, those are all low open rail walls, but to prevent privacy and also I believe part of the zoning standards and general plan require some privacy from the back of house of the commercial center as well. So it's playing a marriage game there of how you give someone their own private outdoor space with some privacy there and prevent views from the back of house of the existing commercial center.
But you do agree that you've told us that this is open and anybody can walk through.
Correct. That's
So
just at their side yard. When you look in from external to the site, you don't see that. And actually, people coming from, say, Sports Basement, for example, now have a new view corridor down Drive D that didn't previously exist. That was the back of a commercial center. So
but if
that's
I'm coming from Trader Joe's looking in the direction of the housing, all I'm seeing is this 6-foot wall.
just at individual homes, you also have full visibility into that paseo and access to the paseo,
But
as well as down
okay.
the drive.
I
courts.
hear what you're saying, but you're also going to agree that if I'm walking through that parking lot, mostly what I'm seeing is the 6-foot wall.
I do not agree with that.
Well, okay, maybe you're taller than I am. Okay. Let's see there. I had one more. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. I have more comments, but that's my technical ones.
Additional questions for the applicant? Commissioner Marks.
I want to start off with something that is for me a concern that I have had for a number of projects. And again, that concern comes out in this project. We have asked applicants early on to go through a concept review where early on in the planning process, the Planning Commission gets in at the ground floor, and almost all of the questions that we have about this project so far, about the site plan, could have been discussed, perhaps even addressed. But at this point, things are so far along. I want to ask you, if we come up with some significant changes in site planning, are you flexible about that?
Well, I would say we certainly want to understand what the suggested site plan changes might be.
Sure you would.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what happens when somebody comes in and there has not been a concept review, they feel like, well, you know, we're pretty far down the road. It's pretty expensive to make the changes. There are ripple effects through the site plan, et cetera, et cetera. Did you know about the concept review that we typically want?
Absolutely, we brought the first project concept that we had on the boards to you on January 5th.
Why not on this one?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I think what we wanted to do was because we had penciled out other interim projects in terms of story height and density, and they didn't work, that given the significant shape or the unique shape of the site, that it didn't lay out too many ways to get the density that we needed, the 14 minimally. So there wasn't a lot of flexibility on the site plan, and we wanted to move forward. So.
Well, I appreciate that was your point of view. From my standpoint, there's not a lot of flexibility left unless we simply say no, and I'm not sure we even can do that. Let me go to my next question. You have 2 parking stalls per unit that are covered in the garages, and you have a driveway where you cannot park on it without intruding into the street and the sidewalk, correct? So my wife and I work, let's assume, and we have a teenage daughter who drives. Where does she park? What we are doing here is, even though there is discussion about no shared parking between the residential units and the commercial units, you are essentially forcing that person to park in the commercial lot. Where else are they going to go? Do I tell my daughter, you know, drive around and hope you find a spot? I'm wondering, how do you deal with that? It's very common that there are 3 cars in a family-oriented community like ours, even 4 cars, which I'm not pressing for, but But I wonder how we can have a shared parking agreement that doesn't recognize that if there is a third car in a family, and we use the standard roughly, I believe, Lauren, of 2.9 persons per household. So the 0.9 person who drives, where do they park?
So, I get the perspective and I understand the concern, but the project does park to code and so I'm assuming if you say we want a third spot per house, given the shape of that site, the constraint of that site, the density, the 40 units on the 3.91 acres gross, we can't get a third parking space and have the project work.
I understand
It
that.
becomes infeasible.
I understand that. And in the shared parking projects that I have been involved with, that is why the commercial space or the office space becomes the third parking stall for anyone who needs it. I don't know whether it's your concern to have the residential units park in the commercial area, or if that's something that the staff believes, but ultimately you can't leave people in that position. The shared parking agreement either has to allow the residential people to park there, or we are creating a situation for the people that live there that, you're going to find that people are parking in the driveway and blocking free access. So that's something I would like to have addressed in some fashion for the next meeting. I want to ask the city.
Can I just comment on that one item?
Sure. Yeah.
You did propose a very small shared parking arrangement, as I recall.
It is between the eating and drinking establishment and the balance of the shopping center.
Okay, and then in the staff report that highlighted that the commercial spaces provided were 680 versus 586 required, leaving in my mind 94 surplus parking stalls in the commercial part of the center. Did you do a parking study to confirm those numbers? Is there excess capacity for parking?
We did, and there is, yes.
There is.
Yes.
Okay, so just to reinforce before we move on to the second point, it seems like there's an opportunity.
And we can provide that
address
for
this.
you at the next.
Well, I don't really
meeting.
care about the study, but the shared parking arrangement with the commercial center, I think there's certainly an opportunity to at least examine that.
Written it down, we'll discuss it and we'll
Okay.
talk to you when we come back.
Sure. And again, it is a site planning issue for your site. And wherever you're going to have the shared parking, because using the example that I used, my daughter works at night. She comes home at 10:30 after her shift, and parking outside of the community, you need to have a pathway from the shared parking. It needs to be lit. There needs to be some security about it. You don't just tell people park in a dark parking lot at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. So moving on to another topic, I wanted to ask the city attorney. We received a letter today from the Greenfire law firm. And at our last meeting, I believe we also received a letter from the Greenfire law firm. I'm not asking you tonight to critique it or evaluate it. What I'm asking is that the attorney for your company respond point by point to that letter in writing to us and submit it in the next staff report that we get, either agreeing or refuting or discussing the points raised in the Greenfire letters, because we are being challenged that we are not following our general plan. And it seems to me that before the Planning Commission can comfortably make a decision, we need to understand not just your point of view, but Alicia, I would like you to take a look at the letter that comes from the applicant and see whether you agree with what they are saying or whether you disagree with Greenfire. In short, we're kind of in the spot where attorneys are battling it out quietly. And those of us who are not attorneys are wondering Are we about to get the city into something that we don't want, or are we on firm footing? And so I'm asking your attorney to respond in a timely way to the next meeting so that our attorney can respond to what you are saying is either acceptable or legal. It seems to me that the Planning Commission needs that. I have a site planning question here now, if I may, for the architect. On plan sheet A 0.1.1, there is a note. It's about the third plan sheet. There is a note at the bottom, the note that is second from the bottom, that reads in part, only lot 1 would have a direct line of sight to the existing back of the house loading area for the retail shops that remain in the shopping center, so the impact to the new homes is minimized. What about lot 1? What can be done to eliminate that view? What options have you studied? What options can you present to us in the next Planning Commission meeting? I'm not very comfortable saying that we took care of 39 yards and somebody who probably bought the last unit because it doesn't have anything screening it now. They sort of, it's tough luck.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some options.
Okay, we can discuss that. And I believe the landscape plan right now shows some screen trees across Drive D
Mhm.
to help buffer that view back. And there's again also a solid wall.
Okay. I would
serving to
give you
break
a
that up.
bias that I have, and that is something we've all seen. Screening with trees always sounds good until the trees die or they're just not in great shape. And then we have the same problem that you started with, where you're trying to screen something. I would like to see something that is permanent, also screened by trees would be great, but I'd like to see an option where the future homeowner of lot 1, if this project is approved, does not carry, a burden that the others don't. I want to turn my attention now. I may have some other comments, but to the Starbucks.
These are just still questions, correct? Because we still have a public comment for questions. So we're still clarifying questions at the point.
I'm
It's
one
up to you.
I'm one of those people who can't resist a microphone. If you put one in
No,
front of me,
no, I just want to make sure we get the questions. So we also get to public comment.
I
as
will
well.
stop and I will
Yeah,
let the
it's good stuff
public
though. Don't lose your place.
speak. We'll talk about this.
Don't lose your place. Commissioner Wallace, do you have any clarifying questions at this point?
I do. The first question I have has to do with the subject that Mr. Barr brought up, which is the non-exclusive easement. My question to you is, in your application to the city, did you agree to place in writing a non-exclusive easement in favor of the city on all the roadways in your project?
We have not done that.
Why?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out.
Okay, because absent that, it does not seem to me that your project meets our requirements for density. Because if you take out those roadways, you don't even come close. But that's something you probably ought to figure out. And I do appreciate. What, you want to say something?
I do,
Go ahead.
through the chair. Typically easements and right-of-way issues are addressed through the mapping process.
Okay,
So it'll be recorded with the map, Mr. Barr, is what you're saying.
Correct.
okay, but first of all, you have to have an agreement to do that. And my point is this, the only way the density of this project works is if we have an easement over all those roadways. And what I'm looking for is a commitment by them to do that. Otherwise, the density doesn't work.
It's not required that the city hold the easement. It can be non-exclusive to the benefit of other parties as well, such as utilities and the like.
Well, utilities isn't going to do us any good. I mean, the whole
But
point
It's
is
access.
our people can access those roadways. Otherwise, it's of no use to the
You're
city.
correct, but basically as part of the mapping process, it's also something you can specify in the conditions of approval for the map.
Okay.
And we're not at that point yet.
I understand that, but the problem I have is that we are at a point, we got about 10 days to fish or cut bait on whether the project as currently in front of us meets the requisites of the general plan and the zoning ordinance. Second question, with respect to the marketplace, we talked about the sports basement. Does your company own the part of the marketplace that would be north of Trader Joe's, which be where Buffalo Wild Wings used to be, and the Rock, School of Rock is. Do you own all that too?
Yes, sir.
So is the only area that you don't own in what we consider the Marketplace Center, the area that sort of begins with the hotel, motel, right off of Bollinger all the way down to about the daycare center?
So on the west side of the property coming down Market?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And just so we're clear, you have not had any conversations with any of the property owners on the west side of Marketplace about some type of master plan?
That's correct.
Is there, I believe there currently is a way to access the shopping center from the other side of Marketplace, like where the sports basement is, because there's an entry that is between Firehouse 31 and the next wing down, the wing that Learning Express is in. Am I correct?
Yeah, Scott, are you on? Can you answer that question, Mr. Grady? I believe there is, but I want to.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of that. Yeah. Yeah. But-
Scott, you should be able
Front-
to speak.
Yeah, there is no separate access there. We've just got Montgomery Street, which sits between Firehouse and the library.
Okay.
You can walk in over there by the UPS store.
Yeah, that's what I remember. There is,
there
that
is.
is, and that is
Yeah, there's a
roughly across sports basement.
Yes.
Um,
across
over
from the
by
street,
where
from
Jimmy
the gas
John's used to
station.
be.
Yeah, the gas
Oh.
station that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pedestrian access, just not vehicular access. Sorry, wasn't clear.
Okay. Now, I've been down Marketplace a few times. Do you really expect there to be a lot of people who frequent the sports basement or the other businesses on that side of Marketplace and walk across the street to go into Marketplace?
Well, I don't know, Commissioner Wallace, but what we wanted to at least attempt to do is be responsive to that master plan policy in terms of connectivity out to Iron Horse Trail. And we didn't have to put that crosswalk in there. We just figured, how can we be responsive to this policy when it's very vaguely written? There's no process in the city's code for pursuing a master plan, what goes into it, what analysis is required. So we just said, well, let's not be unresponsive. So let's try to create, show some context of the center and what we're trying to do here, some connectivity out to Iron Horse, some connectivity through the residential community into Marketplace, and then south into the, across where the southern entrance is.
Okay.
So I don't know, but
Okay, that's fair. I don't know is an acceptable answer. Now, I'm guessing from your comments that either in your role as a planning commissioner or as your day job, that you've been a participant in drafting master plans for developments, shopping centers or otherwise?
specific plans, yes.
Well, there's a difference between a master plan, and I guess,
There
and a
is.
specific
Yeah,
plan.
there is.
Have you done master plans?
I have.
Okay. I mean, we have one for an area here in San Ramon called City Walk. It's not a specific plan, it's a master plan. but-
Yeah, no, I understand. I
Okay.
understand.
All right. The last clarifying question
Mhm.
would be, just so we're clear, that what you propose to do to the Starbucks coffee shop is not expanding the footprint of the building. What you're doing is increasing maybe the outside exterior places to sit, have a drink or whatever.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry. On your use permit application, the hours of the eating, drinking establishment was 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. Are they currently 5 a.m.? Because that seems awfully early for the neighbors.
I believe they are, yes. Scott, isn't Starbucks 5 a.m.?
Yeah, their website lists their hours as 5 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Coffee shop.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, at this time, we get to go to public comment and. at
Thank
this-
you all very much.
Thank you. Members of the public may address the planning commission item on this agenda item. If you would like to speak, fill out a green speaker card located in the back and bring it to the recording secretary. If you're participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone. If I could ask our recording secretary, how many people are in our Zoom audience tonight?
There are currently 23 attendees.
Great. Okay. And then how many speaker cards have you received so far?
We have 2 speaker cards.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and move to open the public comment. You will have 3 minutes to speak, and please keep an eye on the time, and we will get through as many speakers as we like without cutting anybody off. And do we have any late communications?
6 late communication items were received from Ralph Ballard, 2 by Ariel Strauss of Greenfire Law, Susan Ferris Indercom, Diana Corpy, and Carol Hayek Miller are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting.
And I can confirm that we did all receive those this afternoon, so thank you. So at this time, I'm going to open public comment, and we're going to start with speaker cards first, if we could. And we'll let you get back to set up the timer. Mhm. Okay. You ready? So our first speaker is Susan Ferris Indercom.
Thank you, Commissioners,
Hi, Susan.
and thank you to TRC. I sent in my comments on behalf of Responsible Growth San Ramon. But I want to stress the fact that regardless of the general plan's request for a master plan that's inclusive of the west side, I believe in fairness to the citizens of San Ramon, that TRC needs to present to us a master plan for the balance of marketplace. Just recently, they've started to putty over the extensive dry rot and to paint on the storefronts. But their proposal for this project says nothing about what they're going to do to the rest of the marketplace area. And it's really deplorable, which is why it's not being rented and why people aren't interested in setting up a business there. So I really think it's necessary that we know what they're going to do with the rest of the marketplace if you approve the 40 condominiums, especially in light of the fact that they're asking that the 40 condominiums be parcelized as a separate unit, a separate parcel. They're asking for Starbucks to be parcelized and the driveways to be parcelized. TRC is not in the business of mixed-use housing developments. They're in the business of shopping centers. They own 20 shopping centers. Not one of them is a mixed-use unit. If we're going to be the guinea pig, I really think that the citizens of San Ramon deserve to know what they're going to do with the rest of their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our second card is Ms. Sarantri.
No, it's Taiwan's a country. It's the country. Okay, I was clarifying. Would you please start over? Thank you. So I oppose this project because number one, this applicant marketplace at San Ramon sounds really dubious when their address is in Newport, Southern California. It reminds me of Sandbox VR out of City Center, used an architect firm as an applicant to operate business when the business is headquartered out of Communist China. Marketplace at San Ramon sounds like a recently created entity to mask the real identity of the applicant. I would like a disclosure of this applicant, including their fund source. Also, it reminds me of Sandbox VR asking the city to waive lots of existing ordinances to get commissioner approval. The former Nob Hill project violates policies 4.6-I-20, 4.6-I-18, and 5.6-G-2, which violates our commercial service and shopping center requirements, as well as parking spaces for guests which can bring 50 to 100 cars every day that will interfere with shopping and traffic experiences in this area for existing residents. The only proponent comment carbon copied, the only proponent comment that I saw today, carbon copied to hdccalifornia.gov. Opponents are real residents who are concerned about water, air, traffic, power availability, inconsistent and non-compliance with our housing plans and zoning usage, as well as a law firm representing lots of citizens against a project. And I myself, of course, is also an opponent of this project. This project has strong help from our city attorneys and planning department staff, which also smell really fishy. Just reminds me also of the Sandbox VR project, also a Mr. Driscoll project back earlier this year, who passed Sandbox VR using an arcane arcade law from the 80s with the help of our city attorney, as well as our planning department staff, loopholing age requirement out by using body height for customers, then subjecting our children as young as 4th grade to become their prospective customers, which business require equipment with heavy sensors strapped to their body parts that track their movements and decision-making. Naomi Yen was the one who came out to receive an appealer at the time, which was very suspicious because any appeals really should be received by our clerk. So I really would like to inquire into why is it that our attorney's office and our staff are actually helping this project when it sounds and looks and walks like a Frankenstein project. I would like a disclosure of the project fund source because it is necessary to know why is it that this project is having so much help coming from our own staff that really isn't how our codes and our ordinances are guiding all the projects to be.
If I could ask you to wrap up,
Furthermore,
please.
3 feet.
You're 22 seconds over. So if I could ask you to finish your sentence.
Okay. So 3 feet driveway is extremely dangerous when there are a lot of children coming out of the library. And furthermore, the lacking of concept review pointed out by Commissioner Marks, which I thank you, truly should have been caught by the staff as well as our attorney. So please oppose this project.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other speaker cards in the room?
There are no other speaker cards at this time.
Okay, why don't we go ahead to those on Zoom? How many do we have at this time?
We currently have 3 hands raised.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Diana Corpy.
Hi, thank you, commissioners. First of all, I did submit something in writing, and I'm just going to piggyback on a couple items. Commissioner Wallace, thank you very much for talking about the master plan requirement. That is one of my major concerns, and I did submit that to writing, and so I'm not going to repeat the concerns of the council of the commissioners. And again, Commissioner Marks, thank you for mentioning the parking. My background is I've been a resident in San Ramon, and I am a real estate agent / broker, and I have sold real estate here extensively over the years. And the project, it has alarmed me from many aspects. And thank you, Commissioner Marks. Parking is one of those concerns that I have. Also, the ADU parking. There's no mention of ADU parking. But to move on, I'm going to talk a little bit about the growth strategy 3.1, which is in our city general plan, which actually states that we should not diminish the quality of public services and facilities and lifestyles to the residents of our community. Marketplace has always been a thriving shopping center, which is providing essential services to our community. And it just appalls me that the intentional negligence that TRC has put the project through, going back almost 8-10 years. They have forcibly had tenants leave due to items being in disrepair. I don't want to quote those those past tenants, but I do know I've talked to them extensively about problems. They have created an environment which makes it very difficult for local businesses to thrive, to maintain current clientele, let alone recruit new people to the complex. If you walk around and take some time, as I have, it's deplorable. It's beyond unacceptable. So for them to say that the complex is underperforming, shame on you. This is part of your problem, and it's been intentional, and it's very apparent to those of us that have been shopping there for 30 years plus. I would like to say that in regards to, currently to the growth strategy, I would really ask the Economic Advisory Committee to work in conjunction with the city to revitalize our retail centers. The marketplace has been serving the surrounding communities for years. There's many people that do not have cars that do walk there with their children to go shopping. I get it, Amazon is big, but I like to buy my groceries. I like to see what I'm buying. I can't get my hair cut at an Amazon. I can't get my nails done at an Amazon. So we need to protect our retail centers, especially with the growth pattern that San Ramon is experiencing. You're forcing us to travel farther and farther for our services, which is going to,
Excuse me, sorry. Could you wrap up your thoughts, please?
Yes, thank you. So I ask you that you deny this project, and we need to focus in on the requirements of the city to have a master plan for the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Blickenstaff.
Okay. Hi, Jim. Go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
All right. I just want to cover a couple bases from a stand back perspective, more like a citizen of the city, more like a city perspective than a developer perspective. Because without the master plan that is required by your general plan, you don't have that. And so you're not having the ability to make the smart decision for the city, especially long term. This is a very unique location for a grocery store. It serves the community. It has literally thousands of people that depended on it that go way back 20, 30 years. And it's going to only get in more demand with or without a pandemic that's losing steam because of the Bishop Ranch bringing in 12,000 plus more people. So it's got a future here that'll be in big demand. And if it's not there, guess what happens? There's more vehicles traveled. There's less walking. There's no place to walk to. You're going to walk to somebody's neighborhood when you could have been walking to a retail center. It kind of works against the city's long-term interests in a lot of ways. And that the legal letter on behalf of Camp Ad by Greenfire also demonstrates how strong the city has in a legal foundation to stick by their mixed use for this property. You don't have to accommodate what I call piecemeal developments that actually could lead to more of the same. And that has nothing to do with mixed use. So you have like 11, 12 days to maybe 11 days to decide because of SB 330. So you have to be very careful about what you decide. If you put it off indefinitely, you've already decided because SB will say it's approved. And I think I'm seeing where you have to deny it as currently presented to have any options to make it better for the city. And that one of those options is to find a way to make this project work in a limited way, 40 units, whatever, and also keep the location of the grocery store. Keep that in place for future use, because that's a key component of retail. You don't have an anchor store in retail, you're going to have a lot of problems, and it could wither on the vine, so to speak. So you have to be aware of that. And there can't be, under SB 330, there can't be any reduction in housing as proposed. So you have to find either partial housing somewhere else or 40 units somewhere else to make, if this has to fit with the mixed use connotations. And all this can come forward with a master plan, which, according to my reading of the general plan, is required in this case. They actually, I think your general plan uses a word must do a master plan. So I think you need to look at your options here. It's not just take it or leave it. I think if you have to take it or leave it, you leave it and you say, we're going to improve it. And just in a certain situation, it says now you don't have anything that's beneficial to the city long term.
Thank you. Can I ask you to wrap up your thoughts now?
Oh, okay, sure. I think I covered it all. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank you. Our next speaker.
Christian Busey.
Okay. Go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Christian Busey, and I'm an attorney with Greenfire Law, which represents Citizens Against Marketplace Apartment Condo Development, or CAMPAD. I speak tonight to follow up on our written comments submitted to the commission yesterday by Ariel Strauss, who could not be here this evening. Those comments were in opposition to the TRC application. Last year, the appeals court for our district noted in California Renters Legal Advocacy and Education Fund versus City of San Mateo that under Senate Bill 330, quote, local governments are not barred from imposing conditions of approval that do not reduce density, end quote. There was zero recognition in the staff report of this critical distinction between subjective standards that do not reduce residential density and those that do not. That is where the conversation must go from here on out. Imagine for a second that there was no Senate Bill 330. Would you ever imagine ignoring the explicit general plan requirement that this site have a master plan? Or the zoning ordinance's horizontal mixed-use design standards to accept a condo complex merely adjacent to a repainted pre-existing Starbucks is a single mixed-use site? Never. This project is not integrated with any retail. In fact, it's a barrier to the type of interconnection with sports basement that the general plan demands of this specific site. There is no reason that a master plan with sports basement, actual integration with the existing marketplace center, or requiring a site design that meets the city's 2020 mixed-use standards and fosters pedestrian access and affords public amenities needs to reduce the 44 unit count of the residential square footage. As far as the public is concerned, the applicant has never even been asked to show a good faith attempt to comply. The city must enforce its general plan and zoning ordinance to the fullest extent of its ability. If it does not, where will it end? Can TRC demolish the rest of the shopping center, build low density market rate condos there too, and leave only the UPS store, calling that also mixed use? The city need not and cannot accept this potential gamesmanship. Thank you.
Hira Sharma.
Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I'm just using my wife's laptop. My name is Partha Deb. So we recently moved to San Ramon from a neighboring city, Dublin. And we saw how Dublin became super populated and extremely congested over time. And currently we live very close to where this site is being discussed. When I looked at the pictures of the housing that is being proposed, it did feel like we are building a lot of density over very narrow roadways, and it's going to become Dublin 2.0. And I just fear that we don't want to turn San Ramon into something like that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
There are no more hands raised at this time.
Okay, there are no more hands raised at this time. We'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Lauren, could you clarify for us tonight, please? What is it you're looking for from the commission?
Yes, as you're aware, the application was deemed complete, and under state law, we're required to raise any issues or concerns with the project related to general plan consistency or consistency with other city and zoning documents. Absent that, it's deemed to be consistent. So we can raise any points back to the applicant at this point, and then they can move forward with a project that addresses those concerns.
Great. And can you clarify, are we making a decision tonight regarding this project?
No decision will be made regarding this at this hearing. It's really just to solicit input from the commission and the public.
Okay, and then last question. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Wallace. You wanted to follow up.
It goes beyond soliciting input. The city has until October 15th to direct a letter to the applicant outlining the city's position on whether the project is compliant with our rules, which would include the general plan and the zoning ordinance, so that a decision has to be made in the next 10 days. First of all, about whether we're going to send a letter, and second of all, what the letter is going to say. Now, if you want to have a special meeting next week to go over those points, hey, I'm up for that. But if we're not, then we need to make that decision tonight, and the planning commission needs to give directions to staff about that letter.
Correct.
Okay, and so my follow-up question then is, we're entitled, or we're scheduled or slotted to have an additional 3 commission meetings, and the 5th one would be reserved for city council if necessary. So if we choose not to raise any objections tonight, what is the purpose of meetings 2, 3, and 4?
Well, you can work through the development review process. Well, let me back up. We typically would take a project of this nature to the Architectural Review Board, which counts as one of those meetings. And that would leave then 2 for the commission, 1 for the council. If there are points that need to be worked through in discussions, we can forego that meeting with the Architectural Review Board. That's, again, it's not a mandated meeting under SB 330. And there's no actual architectural review application that we're going to be making findings on. So, again, there's some choices in terms of path forward, but what we're looking for is basically some guidance on consistency with the documents in light of the Housing Accountability Act and the objective standard limitations that were being put on. Staff has provided a report, and our conclusion is that the project is consistent. However, the commission is free to disagree with that and raise points that can then be addressed at future hearings.
Okay, thank you. And where I'm trying to fit the pieces together, we did receive correspondence that challenged the consistency received yesterday, and Commissioner Marks rightfully requested the city attorney's office to actually evaluate those for validity. So I'm trying to understand how we can make a determination when new arguments might have been raised that may or may not be valid, but we're waiting for the city attorney's opinion on that. And we have basically a 9-day time window to evaluate that.
Well, the arguments being raised are essentially public comments, and the commission can consider them based on their merit, whether they agree or disagree with those. The city attorney can opine on them as well. Again, there's a lot of different interpretations as to which standards apply and how they are applied. One of the comments was related to the ability to condition projects that in a way that doesn't reduce density. At this point in time, we're not even talking about conditions. So it's really not a point of discussion at this point. We're really just looking at the consistency with the planning documents at this point. And again, absent a decision or some comments to raise questions or concerns, at the end of the 30 days, it's deemed consistent, whether we like it or not.
Commissioner Marks.
Let me please clarify. When I asked the city attorney to review what the applicant has done, there's a lot in the Green Fire letter that is opinion, not law. I don't really, at this point, need to know what the city attorney thinks about their opinion. If they are raising issues of law or clear inconsistency with our zoning ordinance or our general plan, particularly issues that could be litigated, and bring the city into a situation where for months we're going back and forth in a lawsuit, I'd like to know about that. I'm not an attorney. I rely on the city attorney to keep both the commission and commissioners out of hot water. So again, when you read the Green Fire letter or the response from the applicant, which I hope will be very quickly submitted to the city, please separate what is an opinion on their part and ignore that, and just look at what could be an issue of inconsistency or law that we, the commission, need to know about before we make any kind of decision. So in a way, I agree with Lauren. A lot of this is interpretation, but some of it, as I read it, looked to be the precursor to somebody saying, if you do this, we believe we have grounds to legally challenge you. Where we have discretion, they really don't have grounds to challenge us. Where we don't have discretion, we need to know whether or not anything has gone on that is legally amiss.
Thank you for clarifying. That was.
Yeah, let me point out, the rock and the hard place is the fact that, as Lauren pointed out, we, the city, only get 5 meetings. This is 1. If we want to reserve one for ARB, that's 2. We have to reserve one for the city council. That's 3. So we only have 2 meetings that we actually can do anything constructive at. The problem is that we have a deadline of October 15th. If we want to give the staff instructions as to whether to write a letter pointing out deficiencies and what the letter should say, if you are going to wait for feedback from the city attorney, absent a workaround, you're actually talking about meeting number 2, which would limit us to 1 real constructive meeting, assuming we want ARB to review this. And I'm sure we want the city council to have the ability to weigh in. The only other way I can think to do about this, I don't know. This is a question for the city attorney, Brown Act time. If we appointed a ad hoc committee to review the city attorney's analysis that Commissioner Marks was talking about, would that constitute one of our meetings? I'm trying to think of a way to address Commissioner Marks's desire to have feedback from the city attorney prior to dropping the hammer on a letter one way or the other, without losing our ability to actually have another 2 constructive meetings.
So, through the chair, I'm ready to try to answer whatever questions you have about the Green Fire law letter now, and whatever I can answer, I'll be upfront, but I have gone over the letter. Likewise, I'm sure their land use council could try to answer the same if you have specific pointed questions about it. If you need to have some feedback now, I'm willing to give it to you.
I would just also add that the potential for litigation down the line really isn't the primary function of this meeting. There are going to be other opportunities to respond to those concerns and potentially address it. Again, this is about the ability to preserve the rights to raise issues down the line regarding consistency. That doesn't change the process going forward. The applicant still has the right to move forward in this process and address those concerns. And then the commission can make a determination either way. And it'll go its direction from that point. But, the questions about litigation related to, CEQA or any of these other comments, again, that's something we can work through as part of the regular hearing process, in my mind, unless you believe it's a point that relates to general plan consistency. But I believe you can make your own conclusions regarding that.
Well,
with all respect, Lauren, I think we should take our legal advice from the city attorney and not from the planning staff.
I agree.
And if Alicia, if you are prepared to answer a few questions, would it be okay, Mr. Chair, if I ask a few questions?
Please do.
And before I do, let me suggest the staff didn't believe that we needed to go to the ARB before we got these plans. I suggest that we not go to the ARB with these plans and we take that other meeting and we keep it for the planning commission if we need it. But my first question is, do you see anything that we have, if we were to proceed apace right now, and let's say we approve the project, and I'm not saying we will, but let's say we approve the project as it has been submitted to us. Do you believe that we have violated anything in the general plan that we should have done, we didn't look at procedurally, anything that somebody could file litigation against the city for having violated its general plan? Now you're smiling and maybe that's too broad, but that's what I'm looking for.
Well, lawyers, we always say you can be sued pretty much for anything. So.
But that's a
we're gonna,
non-answer.
that's.
I'm
but-
asking you what
but-
you see.
But from the scope of whether there's general plan consistency and whether there's a question of, is the plan consistent as presented? Just that specific question. I don't see any problems with general plan consistency.
And do you see any problems with, again, if the project were approved as it is currently submitted, with consistency with the zoning ordinance?
No, there isn't an issue with consistency with the zoning ordinance to the effect that the Housing Accountability Act allows for the zoning ordinance to not be aligned with the general plan. So it allows for that inconsistency as long as it follows the general plan, objective standards. And so you may, as long as it follows general plan objective standards, then the housing projects should be approved basically under the Housing Accountability Act, unless there is a health or safety issue. And if there's a question about whether it's objective, then you use a reasonable person standard.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that while there is lots of opinion in the Green Fire letter, there is nothing that pops out at you that says, yeah, we really should have done this differently if we were going to be consistent with either the general plan or the zoning ordinance. We did not violate any of the policies in the general plan. We did not violate any of the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Yes, we used some discretion where we had discretion. We did not go beyond where we had legitimate discretion.
We are not going beyond where we have discretion.
Okay.
Keeping in mind that the Housing Accountability Act is imposed upon us.
Okay, no, I understand that. I simply want the planning commission to be comfortable that, yes, we get letters from attorneys, we get letters from lots of folks, and they may think we are violating something. That's opinion. We're taking our legal direction from you, and you're saying it is only opinion. We are not beyond that. And if that were the case, and apparently it is, then I can back off from requiring, or not requiring, but asking for a letter. As to what we can do in the future, what would be the purpose of the meetings, we still have things to talk about. There are still site planning issues that we might want to talk about. There's architectural issues perhaps that we want to talk about. Tonight, I was going to lay down a marker about the renovation of the Starbucks site, which I don't find particularly acceptable. But again, I will say that at this point, my concerns about law are assuaged. And Alicia, I don't do well in small rooms with bars. So, I'm depending on you.
You
Okay,
won't be in
thank-
jail for this.
Okay. So at this point, you know, we're gonna explore some more, you know, this, if I interpret it correctly, in where there are objective standards in our general plan and or zoning ordinance, or if there are none or they're inconsistent, the general plan trumps the zoning ordinance. There is nothing in this application that we've identified that are in violation of the objective standards that we have.
Correct.
That-
There's, we can implement our objective standards, but those that are subjective, they're not clear, you know,
Right, understood. There's quite a few
Right.
subjective.
correct, or they're written in
statements.
a way that people can
Would not-
opine in different
would-
ways, and which makes it subjective.
Right, so so just to make sure I understand, there are where we have objective standards, it is consistent with those objective standards.
Yes, and we can impose those
Okay.
standards.
Okay. Commissioner Wallace, I'll turn to you and see.
Okay, let's talk about objective standards.
Okay.
Density of the project is an objective standard. That's, you divide one number by another number and you come up with a third number, correct?
Yes.
All right, so it seems to me that the issue about the appropriate density of this project has to do with how the private roadways are treated. Now, clearly, the private roadways are not public streets as described in the general plan. The question that Mr. Barr raised was, well, couldn't these roadways be considered non-exclusive easements? And I raised the point that, well, the application, as far as I can tell, doesn't have any commitment on the part of the applicant to grant an easement over the roadways in favor of anybody connected to the city. Now, Mr. Barr pointed out that it's common to have those types of easements granted in connection with the mapping process. And he mentioned utilities. Well, I really don't care about utilities. What I care about is if these are going to be treated as public streets for purposes of calculating the density, then the citizens of San Ramon damn well better have the right to walk on those streets. And that, to me, requires a written, recorded agreement giving the city and or its citizens the right to walk on those roadways. If we don't have that, then we don't have an exclusive easement that serves the purpose of allowing the applicant to skate on the density for this project. Now, I don't see how we can wait until the mapping process takes place after the project is approved, months down the line, to see if in fact there is an easement that meets those requirements. So in my view, at this point, based on the record I have in front of me, I believe that the applicant's project is in violation of the general plan's density provisions because there is no showing that there is a non-exclusive easement over the roadways in favor of the city that is the functional equivalent of a public street, which is the basis for taking the roadway out of the calculation of gross acreage, which allows the project to meet its 14 dwelling units per acre bogey.
I would like to know about, I believe Lauren brought up the Golden Gate property, and I believe there's a private roadway that's used that is not blocked off and people use it and travel it, and it's private.
Okay, A, I don't know about that.
That's Hooper Drive.
B, telling me that another project has something like that really doesn't meet the requirement for this project having that. And I don't know that we can approve the project with a condition of approval that says thou shalt record an easement on the roadways in favor of the city of San Ramon and its citizens. What if they say, no, we don't want to give that to you? We could say, well, you can't have the project. Well, then you come back to the point, well, wait a minute, this is not a objective determination. That's my problem.
It's also, it's a condition that doesn't affect density in this case because you're not reducing density by doing it. But that said, you can raise this question and we can respond to it.
That's what I'm trying to get. I realize that this is a long-winded way, and that's only because I had way too much coffee this afternoon. Okay, good. All right. That's item number one.
So
Item
let
number
me just make sure we pause right there.
The only reason I brought it up is because I believe, I don't know if we used that as part of our density calculation, took out, I don't know if that was part of it, or there was internal streets that were considered private that
Did-
we also took out, but we didn't ask for
There-
non-exclusive easements at the time.
I don't,
remember
I
that.
don't believe that in connection with the Golden State property, the issue of whether there was adequate density ever came up.
It was not part of the
Right.
question,
Right.
and that's part of the initial process that we went through with an early SB 330 application that led to the meeting tonight.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. That's what
Okay.
spurred this. The second point I wanted to raise that has to do with the issue of consistency with the zoning application, zoning ordinance in our general plan has to do with the issue about whether the failure to make any additions or other structural changes to the Starbucks building removes this project from being considered a mixed use, because the only thing that's being constructed is a purely residential project. Now, staff was of the view, and it's in the staff report, that there's an inconsistency between our general plan and our zoning ordinance, because the general plan does not contain provisions for what the types of definitions that appear in the zoning ordinance. Now, my view, based on my reading of the general plan and the zoning ordinance, is like every other zoning ordinance, and I know Commissioner Marks probably has an opinion on this, but the zoning ordinance implements and provides specificity for the general conditions of the general plan. And it's only if there is a direct conflict between the two that the zoning ordinance is deemed to be in violation of the general plan and then a nullity. And I don't see how saying a mixed use project, which by definition in the general plan requires both residential and non-residential uses, is violated by a fact that says you have to have some change of the property to be considered mixed use. Otherwise, a person could tear down with impunity non-residential property, put up a building and say it's really mixed use because I left on site a 250 foot square of barista spot. I don't see the conflict between the two that staff does. And it appears to me that to preserve our right to further explore this matter, that a letter should be sent to the applicant pointing this out.
So I guess the part of the zoning ordinance that you're referring to, I haven't looked at, so I'll have to look if you could tell me what part.
It's in the glossary.
In the glossary. Yeah, absolutely. I have to look at it specifically, but if I mean, are you saying that that part is, I guess, objective, or, I mean, the way that it's written?
Well, it clearly is objective because it says, it defines, first of all, a mixed use. And then it does a proposed project, which says that a proposed project is one in which there is an alteration of the property. And it's something that changes a structure but doesn't add to it, doesn't qualify. Right. Changing a window is not an addition to a structure. The whole point was that if you were going to have a mixed use development, you got to build something that's both residential and non-residential. And this project doesn't have any build out of any type of non-residential substance, particularly one that doesn't meet the definition of a proposed project in the zoning ordinance, which, according to the glossary in the zoning ordinance, defines terms that otherwise aren't defined elsewhere in the zoning ordinance. And it also says that the city council has found that the zoning ordinance is compliant with the general plan. So you put those two together, and let's put it this way, you at least have an issue that warrants a further discussion on this subject. And the reason I brought up these 2 points is on these 2 points, we're not sort of, going around the edge, is the landscaping a little bit too light? Is the sound wall a little bit too high? It's whether this project really meets our definition of mixed use. And that's why I brought it up.
Through the chair, I think it's a wonderful topic to cover in a letter. We can debate some of the subtleties of what, how a project is defined and created and constructed, what is meant by that. But rather than debate that here, we can have the applicant respond as well as staff response.
Okay.
But it deserves some discussion.
Okay, that's all I was trying to do, was to preserve our right to have a discussion and preserve whatever rights we have under the Housing Accountability Act.
Sure.
Okay, so to make sure I understand what we've just decided, we've identified two potential issues with general plan and or zoning ordinance consistency.
Correct.
The density calculation and the definition of mixed use as the current project proposes. And identifying them is not the same, is just that's it. It's just identifying them so that we preserve our right to have further discussions around those two items.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all. Okay, we're not done. We're not done because I think we also have some. Are there any more discussion on the general plan consistency at this point? Okay, good. I think we should now probably turn our attention to the development project. And if we have any feedback for the applicant to take back. And before we leave tonight, I think we want to get commission consensus on whether we want to keep the next 3 meetings for ourselves or wish to allow one to go to the ARB. And I've heard one comment already. So with that, why don't we turn to Commissioner Kuznick? Do you have some observations on the project itself that is feedback, knowing where we are with the consistency part of the discussion?
Well, I actually drafted, comments on several topics, but it sounds like you were interested in a specific area.
Well, I don't want to short you on any of your comments, of course.
Well, if I think I understand what you asked me for, so if we're asked about the development of this particular project, I mean, I do have some general concerns, but the one that seems to be much more specific for me is the degree at which this represents a walkable neighborhood. And part of this is, and this was, I had like 5 points, but I'll just give you one at this juncture. In looking at who will be the likely residents in this area, that if these are families, particularly with small children, they're likely to be enrolled in Montevideo Elementary School. That would require them to come out of their residential neighborhood, cross Marketplace, go through what is still right now just a dirt path, past Sports Basement, and get to Iron Horse Trail, which is a really good way to get to that school and does, again, meet our desire for walkability. But getting from a front door to the Iron Horse, I find that to be under planned for. I have ridden my bike on Marketplace. I have tried to cross the street on Marketplace. It's not good right now. And you add 40 more residents and more cars and children. I think that is under planned for. Yes, someday we will have an overpass. With all due respect to our city fathers, I'm not holding my breath. And so, yes, eventually we will have an overpass. So again, families with children can get over to Central Park. In the meantime, they will then still have to cross Bollinger Canyon Road, either by City Hall, at the Iron Horse Trail, or up at Alcosta to get across a very busy street to get to that playground. So I have some concerns about that. We have had lots of projects where we've made it a point to talk about ways in which we are activating the sidewalks. That seems to be our theme, particularly in our walking district. And there has been no attention to any of that, at least in the project that I've seen. There, it's not there. That's my opinion. And so I'll pause there. I have some other issues about the density, but those are the ones that were much more specific in my remarks. I may reserve my time. The gentlewoman from.
Anytime. Okay. Maybe I wasn't entirely clear. I didn't want to cut off anybody's discussion tonight. I wanted to make sure we got through the general plan consistency topic, but all other topics are certainly fair game. Okay. Okay. Commissioner Marks, I think you probably had a few things that you still didn't get to before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to this design, and with the understanding that the basic land use issue is still the controversial aspect of this whole thing and is to some extent unresolved, the architecture that's proposed is I think acceptable. In fact, I like it. It is simple. It fits in with the area relatively well. And I don't see any need to go to the ARB, particularly given the controversy of this whole project and the need to have as much public discussion and input as possible. That won't happen at an ARB meeting. It will happen at a planning commission meeting or a second city council meeting. I've talked about parking, which is a site planning issue, and the need to have a shared parking agreement that addresses the shortfall of the third car in the residential area. The last thing I want to talk about tonight is the proposed redesign of the Starbucks area. I don't want to come off as, I should be the designer here. I shouldn't be, but let me tell you what I see. The plan that was submitted to us is very vague. I would like a scaled plan that I can really review. This plan has very few tables. I think that the paved area, the cement area where the outdoor area is now, should be enlarged. It's bounded on the west, that paved area, by about a 3-foot planter area that's unplanted and is not going to be maintained well in the future. I doubt that it will be. Extend the pavement over there. You can get more tables in. The same thing, there is a low hedge on the east side of the outdoor area, which is right adjacent to a landscape area. Get rid of the hedge. Expand this area. This is, if there's any kind of public benefit at all to this project as viewed by the residents of the area, and I'm not suggesting that there's a great deal, it's make this a much more attractive area. Get an overhead shade structure or a trellis, or give it some definition. It is right now just a blah area with beat up furniture, dead landscaping. There are 2 circular landscape areas that haven't been planted in years. One of the things that I'm looking at downstream, if this project is approved, is a condition of approval that requires maintenance, real ongoing maintenance, irrigation, and furniture that, I sat at a table today and I had to rock back and forth as I was writing because the thing is just totally unbalanced. It's like nobody gives a damn about that area. And unfortunately, that's wrong, but particularly if you're going to use this building as your rationale for this being a mixed use project, then put some money in it, put some design in it, put some long-term commitment to it. I think that at the next meeting, I would like a large scale drawing that shows a much better design, a much more attractive design, And I have a concern about what I see on this handout. It says decomposed granite plaza. I don't know what that means. I don't know if you're talking about taking the cement out and using decomposed granite. But let me say, as somebody who has approved projects like that, if I could undo some of the decisions I've made in the past, that would be one of them. It used to rain in California, and with some hope it will rain again in the future. A decomposed granite area after 2 rainfalls is divoted, riveted, and washed away. You only need to look at the Iron Horse Trail, where the city put in a half dozen or so bike pullouts with decomposed granite, and now you get to walk in mud. Decomposed granite is a bad idea. It is not something that's going to last. Put in some real hardscape, maybe some special pavers, maybe keep the paving that's there and extend the area with pavers at the edges that are intended to replicate or match the color. But my overall point is, do something that is much more extensive and less minimal than this. That may sound like a small item. It doesn't deal with the issue of should we change the land use or not, or is the density appropriate, but there isn't any other special aspect about this for the general public other than the Starbucks. And quite honestly, telling me you're going to replace the glass, to me, that's a deferred maintenance issue. That's not a design issue. That's not something that is going to be, wow, I'm going to go into the Starbucks today because I'm looking at a different set of glass. I want something that pops, that will be maintained, and that is a real gathering space, because in this city, I have been asked many times as a member of the ad hoc committee looking at the general plan, why are the shopping centers so boring? Why are they just sort of dead places? They were designed to be that way, but that's not what people want these days. People want a place to gather. They want a place to come and schmooze, to meet a friend or sit down with their iPad and think for a while. This doesn't do it. This says a minimal amount of space. We really don't want you to be here all that long. That doesn't work for me. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Willis.
Well, in preparation for the meeting, knowing that the rest of my fellow commissioners would be looking at the real important stuff like landscaping, walking, stuff like that. And unfortunately, Commissioner Edwards isn't here, who I'm sure would have really been a participant in that. I basically focused on the 2 points about the issue about consistency with our planning documents, because that's the one that had the short fuse. I will say this. Commissioner Marks mentioned that he liked the style of the condos, although I have a hard time calling them condos because they're separate buildings, which allows them to avoid the actually providing affordable units. But, I look at that and think, okay, so what do we have? We have 2,200 square foot buildings that are going to sell for $1.6 million, $1.8 million, depending upon when they get built. But it really doesn't do anything for the problem we really have in San Ramon, which is affordable units for real ordinary people. Now, we do have a sort of a template for that. The building across the Iron Horse Trail that we greenlit about 2 weeks ago, the apartment building that's the first part of BR 1A, is designed for ordinary people, which was the vision of the North Camino Ramon specific plan. And while the buildings that are proposed, I agree are nice looking, they don't really meet that particular part of the need. And they are sort of out of place in their neighborhood. As I mentioned, you have the apartment building down the street, which is smaller units, 1-2 bedroom studios. You look across the street, they talked about the walking to the neighborhood apartments. Well, that's Reflections and the I forget the name of the other one, but they're studios, 1 or 2 bedrooms, because my mother used to live there when we first moved here. So that's the milieu of that area. And I would have been a lot more comfortable with a project where the average size of the units was 1,600 square feet, and they had a mix of 1, 2, maybe 3 bedrooms, maybe 3 stories, because that would have fit in that area, and you'd be able to meet the density issues. No sweat, no muss, no fuss. And if you're a shopping center owner, I would bet that if you put 100 condos in there like I've described, you're going to get a lot more business in the rest of the the rest of the shopping center than what's being proposed. So I regret that the applicant, when they first came in with 250 units about apartments. And when they sort of got negative feedback because the size of that development, the pendulum slung way over the other way. So they cut it down and made the units bigger. And so I wish they could have come back with a happy medium where they had condos, even for sale units, but smaller and more of them to really provide a real basis for, the rest of Marketplace, not to mention what could be across the street at City Center, assuming that the walkway gets built. So I regret that the project went that particular way. But maybe we can work around the edges to make some improvements on the project if we get that far.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to Eric, I want to make a point. I don't think the applicant is the problem with what you were just talking about, no affordable units. I may be the only person on the Planning Commission who feels this way, but it is the city's affordable housing ordinance that is the problem. Allowing people to fee out is exactly the problem. It is far cheaper to fee out on a development than it is to provide the units. And when you are doing your pro forma review and you're taking a look at such things as ROI, you would take a look at, gee, I have to provide affordable units. I can't afford to build the 2,200 square feet to 2,400 units. In my view, this is a case where an applicant has read what we allow, has found what makes sense from their standpoint financially, and we are responsible for the fact that we're not getting affordable units. We talk about it from time to time, but we never seem to get to the point where we amend the ordinance or we jack up the fees. We charge so little that why would you not fee out as much as possible?
No, Commissioner Marks is absolutely right. And we have talked at this level. And I also think at the ad hoc committee, it's come up that there's a gaping loophole in our inclusionary housing ordinance that was done for a valid reason, because everyone thought single family homes are going to be like Doherty Valley, 2,500 square foot on 600-foot acre lots. Well, it turns out not to be that way. And all the projects we've seen since then are like this one, like BR6, nice buildings, but the average person who is in Contra Costa County could never afford them unless they were basically downsizing from a bigger house. So Commissioner Marks is actually right. I don't know what we need to do to spur some thought about that at the level it needs to be, whether it's HAC or the city council, but that's definitely, I think, something we need to look at. We'll add that to our sort of laundry list and how we want to rewrite the general plan and other things.
Well, the benefit and the difficulty of going last is there's not much that hasn't been said, but I need to say something. Well, first of all, just to echo, I think parking is a huge opportunity, and I think it's easily addressed. And we all know that people tend to have more than 2 cars or less than the ability to park 2 cars in their garage. So when we come back, I would like to see better, more expanded shared parking. I also agree with Commissioner Marks on the Starbucks. I think that there was just a minimal effort to embrace that space, and given the importance in it as a mixed use development, I think there's a lot more that could be done. And I know you're capable of doing that. The topic of master plan for the area, I think, is weak. I think, is it legal? Is it meet our standards, our object standards? I think the answer is yes, but I don't think it shows best work at all. I think there's a lot more that you could do. To call out that you don't own the sports basement property as an explanation why a master plan can't be developed, I think is fake. I think you own probably 3/4 of the property there. If you go across the street and you include Buffalo Wild Wings, now vacant, the library property, all the way up to Alcost, I think that there's significantly more that you could look at. You know, can we force you to do it? Absolutely not. We get that. But I think it's to your benefit as well as the city to make this a showcase project. You're on a corner of the city that is the most visible and vibrant part of our future. And to abandon that responsibility, I think is just irresponsible of you as a property owner. Internal to the project, I don't see that I saw a lot of effort to really provide connectivity between the housing units and the retail that is there. And I think that, again, there's no there, I guess. It doesn't show any effort to create a vibrant mixed use, all the nouns and the adjectives they use that described it. I don't think I see it in the plans that have been submitted so far. Like Commissioner Wallace, I wish that you would have done a concept review after the first one. The first one was too big and this one's too small. We're not at the Goldilocks place here. It really should have been something different. And we would have, if you would have come with a concept review, I would have certainly said, we don't need 2,200 to 2,500 square foot units. We need 1,500 square foot units. Absolutely. That's what we need in the city. And if you would have had more units, we wouldn't be having the debate about density, because you would have had 10, 20 more units there. And it would have also enabled the retail from an economic development standpoint. 40 units there doesn't do much for the shopping center, and it doesn't do much for our housing. And like my peers up here, it's the inclusionary housing ordinance that's the problem in our city. To be able to fee out at $1.50 a square foot just doesn't help anybody. I think this is going to generate maybe $130,000 or $140,000 to our inclusionary housing, our affordable housing fund. It doesn't do much, but that's not your issue. You're making smart business choices. I think that's like us. It's how do we address that at a city standpoint? Because every time somebody fees out, we get the units. We make no effort to get closer to our arena numbers because they're not building the units, and we're not really getting enough money to truly make a meaningful difference. So I know that you're capable as a company of doing good things, because you did the Trader Joe's across the parking lot and you did a significant upgrade there. And I see that you're starting to address some of the maintenance on the properties across the way there with the plywood that's up there. So I know as a company, TRC is capable. I hope that when you come back, that we'll see some of the skill and the talent that I know that you're capable of showing. I do not believe that we need an ARB. I think I'd like to keep the meetings for ourselves. And I think I've heard at least 2 people say that. And Commissioner Wallace, you're comfortable with, and Commissioner Kuznick as well. Okay, so Lauren, I think we'll keep this one, and any other final comments from our commissioners?
No, I'm just going to second the idea that, it seems like a lost opportunity to have 40 houses or 40 units that are going to be in the 2,200 square feet, and a site that really could have been a place for the 1,200 to 1,600 square foot housing. We don't have a housing crisis for $1 million homes. We have a housing crisis on starter homes, and ones that the workforce housing market can afford. And this would have been a great place to make your mark in this community, responsive to this community, to what our needs are as much as what your needs are. And I would just like to say that in older parts of other towns, people used to put in duplexes and quadplexes. And this seems to me like one of those great spots. And then the final question that I have is, why stop at that, magical place at the driveway? Why not extend all the way to Alcosta and rethink that last little parking lot? Because that's kind of a dead space in your lot. And it seems like you're just so committed to this horseshoe shape, no matter what. And maybe it's time for another round of creative thinking. So, and I would support that, with great effort, but then I'm kind of a out of the box thinker. So there we go. Duplexes, smaller.
Thank you, Commissioner Kuznick. Lauren, do we need a motion to continue this hearing or to a? Okay, so with that, I think have we provided sufficient direction to staff on this and applicant? Terrific, then we can move on. Thank you. And everybody that's been hanging in here for the evening, we appreciate that. And we are almost done okay, item 11, non-public hearing action items. There are none. Item 12, study session and commission liaison reports. Mr. Kuzik, do you have a liaison report tonight?
The Housing Advisory Committee had a meeting to discuss the changes in the affordable. What is the correct terminology here, Lauren? The fees charged for getting 100% affordable projects, correct?
Affordable housing, affordable rental housing impact fee waivers.
There you go. And so it was a really interesting discussion about all the fees that are charged, and that perhaps one of the ways of getting more of these kinds of units would be to waive some of the fees, but not 100%. For those, some of them at 100% service fees would be a percentage. And I believe after hack, it could actually come back to us. And no, never mind. So to be discussed further in other groups of citizens.
I can give you an update on that.
Thank
It actually went to the policy committee last week. Policy pushed it on to city council for consideration at their next meeting on the 11th. So it'll be on the agenda for discussion. And just to clarify, this is about waiving certain impact fees for 100% affordable housing projects at the below 80%. So low, very low, extremely low. And it's a way of generating a revenue source that could be considered a local match for 100, for affordable projects. And again, it's only dealing with those 100% affordable.
Nope. Commissioner Wallace.
I do. Commissioner Marks and I attended our favorite thing, which is the super ad hoc committee late last month. So I'm going to sort of go from top to bottom. First of all, the ad hoc committee, which includes 2 city council members, was in agreement that the area north of Crow Canyon Road, which is the mixed use commercial emphasis area, should have an FAR of 0.45. That's our initial attempt to make sure we actually get some non-residential use. Second of all, the committee, including the council members, were in support of keeping the area on Camino Ramon east of Camino Ramon, where Federal Express is, as commercial mixed use only. For the area that is going south, which is the mixed use residential emphasis, the original plan did not have any type of requirement or mathematical requirement for non-residential use. Commissioner Marks, and I think I can speak for him in this, and I both felt that it was necessary to have that. No one wanted to put out a number particularly, so I put out 0.25. The area at the bottom, which is Chevron Park, otherwise known as downtown mixed use south, we got grudging acquiescence from the city council members that it would be premature to rezone that area right now. In all fairness, this was before the announcement came out as to who was actually acquiring Chevron Park. But I think the logic in not right now knee jerking a change in the zoning makes sense, because that will give sunset time to figure out what it wants to do with that property, as well as, I guess, there's a part of the BR1 plot, I think it's 30 acres could be used that they own as well. The other issue that came up, and we still haven't reached a consensus on this, is downtown mixed use north. That is the area immediately north of the city center mixed use area. It does have a higher density than the other areas. But as of yet, we have not reached any type of agreement on what should the non-residential component be. I think certainly I do, and I believe Commissioner Marks feels as well, that this is an area that if you are serious about having mixed use, you need to put some numbers on the table to tell people that that's actually what we want. Now, in all fairness, Jerry Engen talked at our meeting, as he did at the city council meeting the week before, and he was basically opposed to us requiring in these mixed use areas to have any specific number of non-residential FAR or anything like that. I don't agree with that. I'm not sure the city council members bought off on that either, but that is an issue. We haven't come up with the number for that area or the area immediately above that in terms of mixed use. And as you know from our meeting tonight, the problem with our mixed use zoning is that we don't have any objective standards as to what is required for non-residential use. And we are just begging to have our heads handed to us on that subject. So we don't have another meeting scheduled. I imagine there'll be one at the end of this month because HCD hopefully will come back with their blessing on our housing element by the middle of the month. If not, well, we'll, crack open a beer and figure out what we're going to do next. So that's my report.
See, there's a comment card. Is it a comment card related to our study session commission liaison remarks? Okay, come on down.
Taiwan's the country.
Okay.
Hi, commissioners. I want to address Commissioner Kuznick's comment about the policy meeting, which I was in presence. And I want to address that comment along with what I'm observing. It is truly a shame that our city is really weakening the strict requirement of building standards as well as quality of life, hiding behind the excuse of SB 330 as well as CEQA and RENA. SB 330 doesn't exempt you from your fiduciary duty as the local agency who needs to provide discretion on conditions of approval. Yet when I was at the policy meeting, I heard the staff from different departments are now helping the developers in the name of trying to provide housing to the least of us in the name of weakening zoning ordinances, building codes. We might as well just give them housing built from gingerbread. And I'm not sure if that's why our city is going to continue to work as towards as our future. Is that what you want to see? Our future is that $2.5 million waived, the money that should go to schools and parks, even though these people are not well off, they are needy. But is that why you want to offer them something? Is that is really not of quality? To me, it is not conscionable to think that, okay, we're going to invite the least of us here because I'm going to give you something that is, quite honestly, not up to par. So I'm going to ask you to please uphold your fiduciary duty, not only to us who currently reside here, but our future residents, that you will please uphold, your job to provide discretionary approval on conditions that will protect our life and our properties. Thank you.
Thank you. So Lauren, coming attractions?
So a couple of announcements here. So on October 18th, we are working on putting together a report and an item for you related to revisions to the El Nido project. And so we haven't quite finalized the reports for that, but we're working on that for the 18th. In addition, we will also be coming back in the not too distant future with 2481 Deerwood Drive. We're working on the final touches of environmental review for that. And so we'll regain our momentum in reviewing that project and getting it through both Planning Commission and City Council review. So then one other comment. It's with some sadness that I announced that this is Samana's last meeting with the city. She's been here a couple of years actually, but she is going to be pursuing other opportunities overseas. So exciting things to come.
Well, yes.
An adventure, I should say.
We just got to know you. Hope it's not anything we said. No. Well, good luck.
like
And
to expand,
yes, you want
feel
to say a
free.
few words for us, Solana?
Sure. It's been really great. I know I've only been working with the Planning Commission for a year, but it's been a great learning experience. I think I've only had one presentation in front of the Planning Commission as a planner, but two maybe. But yeah, it's been great. I'm actually moving to the UK, so very excited. It's been really great working with you guys. Thank you.
Well, we'll miss you and best of luck. Yeah.
Presentation before us. And
And remember the one presentation that you actually wrote, but we still approved it, even though you weren't here. So I think you get full credit. So you're 2 for 2 with us.
I'm
Yeah.
quite happy to say all my presentations have been quick and easy approvals, so
Yes. So
not controversial.
well, we'll miss you. So good luck though. Okay. With that, I think we can go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for spending time with us tonight and have a good night.